This might actually risk even a bigger chip crunch here, just given that, you still need a lot of this sort of energy to really fund this sort of AI boom. And certainly when it comes to some of these chip makers, that is the latest focus here on, of course, that new supply crunch. And Bloomberg Intelligence says when it comes to some of these Asian chip makers, they have about 3 months until a deficit of this gas begins to bite. Let's get to our Asia tech correspondent, Annabelle Jeweler. She's with us here right now. First of all, just walk us through the whole process of helium and why we're talking about it now.
Everyone's getting up to speed on what exactly helium is used for in the chip manufacturing process. So there are a lot of technical details to it, but I think what's important to emphasize is that helium has exceptional cooling capabilities. So it's not it's not an ingredient of the silicon wafer itself. It's more used for its cooling properties. So as the size of the chip shrinks, you need to rapidly cool it. And having helium there is what helps have more precision in the etching process, less overheating, and so it drives up your yield. So that is where helium comes into the manufacturing process. What you also need to know, people need to understand, is that there's no substitute for this. This is it, so that is really significant, especially when you get into advanced nodes, so 5 nanometer and below. That's where it becomes really important in the process. So that's sort of the helium component of the chip manufacturing process. But now the next stage is why are we seeing the output taken offline? Yeah. And this comes down to where helium is manufactured, or how we get helium, and that's a byproduct. It's refined out of LNG. And so this Qatari facility has come offline because there's been an Iranian strike. This is the Las Rafin facility. It's the world's largest LNG facility. And so that has knocked that's knocked output off, and that also has a flow-on impact to helium. Even though the US is the world's largest producer of LNG, they're using a lot of that domestically, and you really need that refinement process for helium to come about. And that's mostly being done by Qatar and Russia. And so that is the significance. In terms of the impact, the likes of SK Hynix and TSMC are saying they've got supply for now.
Okay, I was gonna ask you that, yeah.
But does it become an issue further down the track? Possibly. And the big question is, if you have this shortage, do you need to then continue to prioritize your more advanced nodes? And then that exacerbates the memory chip crunch.
Right.
Because that's the whole issue, is that as you have these producers like SK Hynix and Samsung that are putting their bandwidth toward HBM, it's less supply of legacy technology.
Yeah, and those, a lot of we talked about, the other component here was a lot of the orders were already taken up going into next year, right? If they can't come up with it too. Can we store helium? I know that sounds like a dumb question, but how because do you stock up on the stuff?
Well, that's the issue, is that, yes, they're saying they've got stockpiles that can last them for several months.
Okay.
So they're saying we're insulated right now. They don't see any short-term impact.
Okay.
But that is part of the issue around the supply, is that there are tankers that are being filled, but they're also being stuck because the Strait of Hormuz is effectively shut. And so there's really not any new supply coming into the market. They've only got their own reserves, it seems, to go off for now. And as I said, they are saying they've got them to last a few months. The question is, of course, does this extend? And then you'll start to see the impact.